The last proposal. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was a marvel of engineering, a dome of shimmering crystal that reflected the swirling nebula beyond. It was built to symbolize unity among the stars, a place where diplomacy ruled over war, where words shaped the fate of civilizations. Yet today, the air within was tense, thick with unspoken grievances and festering arrogance. At the center of the vast chamber, standing alone on the speaker's platform, was Ambassador Daniel Reeves, humanity's last voice in the council. He adjusted his suit, his expression calm, but the storm behind his eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. This was humanity's 15th attempt to gain full membership in the council. 15 times, Earth had met every requirement. 15 times they had been denied. Before him sat the High Chancellor of the Council, an ancient being from the Avatar species, his silvery, insectoid carapace gleaming under the chamber lights. Beside him, representatives of the Council's ruling species watched with the cold detachment of gods deciding the fate of mortals. Once again, Earth has met every requirement for full membership, Reeves began, his voice steady but laced with an edge of frustration. Our technological advancements now surpass 6 of the current members. Our colonization efforts have been peaceful. We have contributed significantly to medicine, science, and infrastructure across the known galaxy. The Chancellor raised a clawed hand, a signal for silence. Earth's progress is remarkable, he admitted, but full membership requires more than progress. It demands maturity, restraint. Reeves clenched his jaw. The same excuse. Always the same excuse. Maturity, he repeated. Tell me, Chancellor, what does maturity mean to you? The alien's compound eyes blinked slowly, unbothered by the defiance in Reeves' voice. It means understanding one's place in the grander design of things. It means patience, knowing when to wait rather than demand. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some of the younger races shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had seen the human contributions firsthand, witnessed their problem-solving skills, their creativity, their relentless drive. Yet none dared to speak in their favor. Reeves sighed. They were wasting time. 50 years, he continued. We have waited. In that time, we have watched species with half our qualifications be granted full membership. Species that contribute far less than we have. A few heads bowed slightly in guilt, but the Chancellor remained unmoved. Perhaps in another decade, the old being said, we may revisit the discussion. The words hit like a slap. The murmurs grew into whispers, the tension escalating. Reeves could feel his assistant, Lyra, stiffen beside him. He took a deep breath. No more waiting. No more playing their game. No. The chamber fell silent. The Chancellor's mandibles twitched in what passed for surprise. Excuse me. Reeves pulled a small data crystal from his coat pocket, holding it up for all to see. The blue light from its core reflected against the polished floor, casting a faint glow on his fingers. This contains our final proposal, he announced. It is non-negotiable. Earth demands full membership, equal trading rights, and representation on all major council committees. Laughter erupted from a section of the chamber. The head of the Trade Federation, a bloated, slug-like creature, wheezed with amusement. Withdraw to where? Your species relies on council trade routes. Your colonies depend on our protection. Reeves stared at the alien. You assume too much. The Chancellor leaned forward, his voice growing sharp. And if we refuse? Reeves smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You have 48 hours to accept these terms. If you refuse, Earth and all human colonies will withdraw from council space, permanently. The laughter stopped. For the first time, uncertainty crept into the chamber. The silence that followed was heavy. That is a foolish threat, the Chancellor said at last. Your people cannot survive without the infrastructure we provide. Your colonies will wither. Your fleets will falter. Reeves turned on his heel, walking toward the exit. As he passed his assistant, he whispered just loud enough for the council to hear. Send the signal to command. Lyra's eyes widened. "Already?" she whispered back. Reeves nodded. "Operation Ghostlight is active." The murmurs behind them turned to shouts of outrage, but Reeves did not stop. As they entered the human transport vessel, Lyra finally spoke again, her voice laced with nervous energy. "Sir, they're not taking us seriously." Reeves turned, looking through the viewport at the massive council station, a behemoth of bureaucracy and arrogance. "No," he admitted, "they're not." Then, with an almost imperceptible smirk, he whispered, "But they will." The first signs. Across council space, things began to change. At the bustling new Singapore trade hub, 3 human merchant ships simply did not arrive. The portmaster, an insectoid being with 4 eyes, barely registered the anomaly. Humans were unpredictable, after all. By the end of the day, 19 more ships failed to dock. Still, no alarms were raised. On day 2, the Council's communication network noticed irregularities. Messages from human colonies became sporadic. Trade orders went unanswered. Data channels fell silent. The director of interstellar trade scoffed. "Another display of human stubbornness," he muttered. "They'll be back when their supplies run low." That night, he pulled up the tracking data for all registered human ships in Council space. The display was shocking. Every human vessel, every single one, was moving in the same direction. Away. The reckoning begins. On day 3, the first reports of abandoned human facilities arrived. Mining guild representatives sent urgent transmissions. Deep space extraction sites were empty. The machines had been powered down. The quarters were spotless. All records wiped clean. How did they leave without anyone noticing? A security officer demanded. No one had an answer. The council leader received a distress call from the Trade Federation. Human-operated businesses have shut down overnight. The panicked alien reported. Their accounts are empty. Their supply chains have vanished. Even their garbage is gone. Across council space, the price of human-produced goods skyrocketed. By day 4, panic was setting in. A military patrol attempted to track a departing human cargo ship. What should have been a slow-moving hauler performed a maneuver that defied physics, and then disappeared from all scanners. Inside the council chambers, the Ancient One, the last surviving member of a species that had seen empires rise and fall, spoke for the first time in centuries. "The humans were never dependent on our routes," he said softly. "They were mapping their own." Silence fell. For the first time, fear crept into the council. And by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. Humanity was gone, and the reckoning had begun. The silent exodus. The first cracks appear. The Galactic Council, for all its posturing and grandeur, was slow to react. For centuries, it had ruled with an air of superiority, dismissing the lesser species that sought its favor. It had controlled the ebb and flow of trade, dictated the laws of space, and wielded influence over entire civilizations. But now, for the first time in millennia, the Council felt uncertain. At first, the absence of humans was treated as an inconvenience. Trade administrators grumbled about delayed shipments. Mining executives scoffed at what they assumed was a petulant display of human stubbornness. "They will come crawling back," Trade Minister Valcor declared, his avian-like feathers bristling as he addressed the council. "Humans have always been rash and emotional. Give them time to realize their mistake." The other representatives murmured in agreement. A young species like humanity could not survive without the council. That was the assumption, and it was dead wrong. The disappearance grows. On the 5th day, panic began to set in. Reports flooded in from across the outer colonies. Human factories were abandoned, their machinery still warm from recent operation, but wiped clean of any useful data. Their docks were empty, yet no departure logs had been recorded. Even human embassies, once bustling centers of interstellar cooperation, had been stripped bare, so thoroughly clean that scanners failed to detect any signs of prior occupation. It was as if they had never been there at all. Council military intelligence scrambled for answers. Fleet Commander Jorvik, a seasoned strategist from the reptilian Drellic species, studied the reports with growing unease. "They didn't just leave," he muttered. "They erased themselves." A silent withdrawal, carried out with precision. No alarms, no distress calls, no sign of forced evacuation. This was not the reckless tantrum of a young race. This was a plan executed flawlessly, a system-wide vanishing act. On the 7th day, an emergency meeting was called in the Great Hall of the Council. The Chancellor's expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a sharp edge of unease. "Let us be clear," he began, his silvery eyes scanning the gathered representatives. "Humanity has not severed diplomatic ties. They have not declared war. They have simply vanished." An uneasy silence settled over the chamber. "How is that possible?" A representative from the Zarn collective hissed. "How does a species withdraw from interstellar society in a matter of days?" More importantly, Jorvik added grimly, "Why?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. No one had an answer. The economic collapse begins. Then the real damage became evident. Humanity had spent decades embedding itself within the Council's infrastructure. Their medical technology had increased lifespans across the galaxy. Their engineering innovations had allowed colonies to flourish in places that were once inhospitable. Their transport networks, trade agreements, and resource management systems had become the backbone of modern interstellar commerce. And now, all of it was gone. The first major shock came when the Council's food distribution networks, many of which relied on human logistical efficiency, began to fail. Perishable goods rotted in storage. Supply chains broke down. The Trade Federation, once so quick to dismiss humanity, was now in chaos. "Where are the replacement shipments?" demanded one of the trade ministers. "They never existed," a logistics officer admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Humans control that entire sector." The realization hit the chamber like a thunderclap. Humanity had not just participated in the Council's economy. They had been the foundation of it. And now, that foundation had crumbled. A desperate search. By the 10th day, the Council ordered its military to investigate. Hundreds of reconnaissance ships were dispatched to human territories, but the results were always the same. Nothing. Earth's colonies, empty. Their space stations, decommissioned. Even their deep space listening posts, which had once monitored Council fleet movements, were offline, their cores erased. Humanity had not simply left Council space. They had erased their presence from history, the forgotten stations. And then, the first real clue appeared. A small maintenance vessel, operated by a team of independent salvagers, discovered something strange on an abandoned outpost in the Gliese system. Beneath a layer of dust, hidden behind old crates in a storage room, was a message carved into the metal wall. A single sentence: "We gave you a chance. You chose to treat us like children. Now watch what the children can do." The words sent a chill through the Council's intelligence divisions. It was not a message of anger. It was a warning. A ghost in the dark. The Council leader's composure began to crack. "This is absurd," he spat during an emergency meeting. "They must be hiding. A fleet that large, an exodus of that scale. It is impossible to simply disappear." Jorvik stared at the strategic maps, watching the empty regions of space where human colonies had once thrived. He had fought in hundreds of campaigns, seen the rise and fall of civilizations, but never had he seen a species willingly erase itself. And yet, something didn't sit right. A civilization as resourceful as humanity. They wouldn't just leave. Not without a plan. Not without a purpose. Jorvik turned to his intelligence officers. "Start scanning beyond Council territories." The officer blinked. "Sir, the humans aren't hiding within our space," the commander said, his voice low. "They're hiding in the places we never looked." Silence followed. And then, like a slow-moving avalanche, realization spread through the room. The final revelation. By the 14th day, the Council's worst fears were confirmed. Sensor readings from deep space outposts, those far beyond the Council's mapped territories, began detecting something unnerving. Movement, but not in small numbers. The patterns were coordinated. Hundreds, no, thousands of vessels moving through the void. But these were not the clunky cargo ships the Council had come to associate with humanity. These were something else. Something new. The end of an era. The Chancellor stood frozen, watching the data stream in real time. It was undeniable now. Humanity was not retreating. They were preparing. For what? The question hung in the chamber like a noose. And somewhere, in the vast silence of space, the answer was already coming. Faster than anyone could have imagined. Humanity's return. The silence before the storm. The Galactic Council, once an unshakable pillar of interstellar dominance, now stood on the precipice of a nightmare it had never foreseen. The disappearance of humanity had shaken the foundation of galactic commerce, but it was the implications of their absence that sent waves of panic through every species in power. The Council leaders had finally accepted the truth. Humanity had not been bluffing. Their exodus was not a plea for attention, nor a reckless act of rebellion. It had been a strategic retreat, a maneuver so precise, so perfectly executed, that the most advanced intelligence networks in the galaxy had failed to predict it. And now, they had returned, but not as a desperate species seeking re-entry into the Council's favor. No, humanity had returned as a power greater than anything the galaxy had ever seen. First contact. Again. It began with sensor anomalies along the outer edges of Council space. At first, they were dismissed. Glitches, distortions, cosmic interference. Then the first ships went dark. Trade routes, once bustling with activity, were suddenly silent. Merchant fleets that tried to enter human territories never returned. Emergency distress signals were sent. None were answered. And then, without warning, the Council's deep space listening posts detected the impossible. A fleet so vast that its energy signatures distorted nearby gravitational fields. The readings were incomprehensible, their technology unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. They bore no Council markings. No known faction claimed them. They existed outside the carefully controlled hierarchy the Council had established. And yet their movements were calculated, precise, familiar. Then came the transmission. A single message, broadcast on every Council frequency. You had your chance for peace. Now watch what humanity can truly do. The first engagement. The Council military mobilized immediately. The Chancellor himself ordered a fleet of hundreds of warships, some of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy, to meet the unknown armada before it could advance any further. What they encountered was beyond comprehension. The human fleet was not just larger than expected. It was beyond classification. Their ships defied conventional physics, moving in patterns that should not have been possible. Some of the vessels were larger than entire Council stations, built from materials that did not reflect normal energy readings. Their engines left no trace, and their weapons, if they had any, remained mysteriously silent. The Council commander hailed them. This is a restricted sector. Identify yourselves, or be fired upon. Silence. Then, from the darkness of space, the human ships moved. And in an instant, the Council's fleets were rendered powerless. Their communications were scrambled. Their weapons refused to fire. Their engines shut down mid-flight, leaving entire squadrons drifting helplessly. The humans did not fire a single shot. Instead, they tore control away from the Council's hands without a fight. The flagship's admiral stared in horror at his blank control panels. He had heard whispers of humanity's genius, their technological curiosity, their obsession with innovation. He never realized what that meant. Now he understood. Humanity had never needed the Council. The Council had needed humanity. A broken empire, Back at the Council's homeworld, the political elite were in chaos. Every military strategy failed before it could even be attempted. Every countermeasure was met with effortless subversion. The galactic economy collapsed within days as human-controlled networks reasserted themselves, now redirecting trade routes and supply chains away from Council oversight. But the most devastating blow came when Council archives were accessed remotely, not destroyed, not corrupted, but altered. Entire centuries of history, rewritten in real time. Key figures, key decisions, key victories that had defined the Council's rule, all gone, replaced with truths they had buried long ago. The galaxy had always been told that humanity was a young race, a species still growing, still learning. The new records told a different story. A story where humanity had not lagged behind, but had deliberately hidden its capabilities. A story where the Council had never controlled humanity, only believed they did. The final transmission. On the third day of humanity's return, the Council's emergency session was interrupted. The Grand Hall's towering monitors flickered to life, and on the screen stood Daniel Reeves, the same human ambassador who had stood before the Council years ago, demanding fair treatment. The same man they had dismissed as arrogant, as unworthy. Now, he stood before them as the leader of a species they no longer recognized. His face was calm. His eyes held no malice, no hatred, only quiet certainty. "For years we asked for a seat at your table," he said. "For years we followed your rules. We played the game, even as you mocked us, underestimated us, belittled us." He leaned forward, and then we realized something. The room was silent. "We never needed your table. We were building our own." At his words, new fleet movements lit up the Council's tactical displays, movements beyond Council space, in uncharted territories, in deep space sectors the Council had never bothered to explore. New colonies, new trade routes, new alliances, a parallel civilization, built in secret, waiting for the right moment to emerge. "You ruled because we let you rule," Reeves continued. "You held power because we allowed it. But now, the game is over." He gestured, and on the display behind him, the Council's fleets appeared, surrounded, outmaneuvered, already defeated. "This is not an invasion. This is not a war." His final words sealed the fate of the Council. "This is the end of your empire, and the beginning of ours." The fall of the Council. The surrender was immediate. No shots were fired. No battles waged. The Council simply ceased to exist. One by one, member species abandoned it, pledging loyalty to humanity's new interstellar order. Those who resisted. Their planets found themselves isolated, their ships powerless, their industries obsolete. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy. They simply became its architects. And as the last remnants of the old Galactic Council crumbled, the new era began. The era of humanity. And this time, they weren't asking for permission.